Hi all, let's have a look at game 2 of the tie breaks. So Magnus won up in the 4 tie break games and playing black now. Fabiano Caruana playing white, kicks off with e4. We have a Sicilian defense for Magnus, knight f3, knight c6. So the Sveshnikov, a pleasant surprise for me. As I say, it was one of my favourite openings when I was a youngster, full of fun and excitement for me, fond memories, the Sveshnikov. So we see the main more mainstream open Sicilian Sveshnikov. So e5, knight b5, knight db5, d6. Now knight d5, knight takes, knight e7. So previously in the match, knight b8 had been seen. So knight e7 as well in one game with c4, the reaction not a4. So knight b8, a4 we've seen here. We've seen this before as well. Will there be any novelty here? Bishop d7. Queen b4. In fact, there is. Instead of bishop f5, which we've seen in the classical, we see a good alternative, queen b8, just protecting the pawn on d6. Why not? And now h4 is played. h5, bishop e3, a6. The nice thing also about the queen, it was actually supporting a7 as well. So the knight's kicked to c3, and the queen's also spotting b7. So a5, black kicks white's queen there, and kicks again to d1 now. Bishop e7, g3 protecting the h4 pawn, queen c8. Interesting. So before castling, Magnus is indulging in trying to swap off potentially the light square bishops if the bishop comes to e2. And if it doesn't, then bishop g4, and if the queen moves, then bishop f3, and there's a welcoming committee for the white king if the white king's casting over here. So white has to be careful about these light squares in this position. Bishop e2, bishop g4. Now Fabiano plays rook c1. In this position, bishop takes g4. This position, queen e2 protecting c4. Seems as though this should be okay. Say the aggressive f5. This should be okay, this kind of thing. It's pleasant enough for white, no big problem here. So rook c1, and we have bishop takes e2, which weakens both sides basically on the light squares. Queen f5. Now here I have to go back to the art of war. I do think the art of war is relevant to this match. Because there are fundamental concepts in there which pervade chess quite significantly. One of them is to put yourself beyond defeat before going on to the attack. And to do that here, in chess terms, white should really try and castle. In concrete terms, a lot of chess coaches say you shouldn't do active operations before castling and good piece development. Because things could backfire. It's just at a fundamental level. But here, Fabiano does indulge in an active operation before castling c5. So in principle, this is a bit shaky on higher level principles. Also, can I say for a moment that Magnus is also choosing his battlegrounds very wisely. I thought he'd be keen on the tie breaks, so already one up. He's chosen this battleground where he knows he's world champion at Rapid and also at Blitz, and his rating difference is much higher than the classical. So yeah, art of war is worth thinking about, the principles there. So c5, black castles here. If white had just castled, is it that dangerous for the white king? Is there something magical about the light squares? It doesn't appear to be. A move like knight b5 here is fine. That keeps some pressure on d6, and it's comfortable there. It can't even be kicked because of black's a4. That's a logical kind of exploitation of black's a5, a4 using that b5 square. Also, white has other ideas, potentially just to use the e4 square as well as b5. So either e4 or b5 is good here. So say knight e4, that's fine as well because it looks at d6, and there's still potentially things like bishop b4 here looking at d6 without losing the knight. And also white could build up for the c5 break. So it's okay. It's a comfortable position. Say rook fc8, king h2. This is fine. So yeah, white could castle, put the king, go beyond defeat before active operations. But we see, and the other aspect to this concretely here is how an active operation can sort of reproduce quite, unfortunately, there's a tendency to escalate that active operation into an even bigger active operation, so an even bigger potential backfire. And I think, how is this actually, okay, this is high level stuff, but how is this backfiring actually going to occur in this position? Well, let's see what happened now. So c5, Magnus just castles. White could consider here the forcing move to sort of minimize the commitment to active operations, basically, to play c takes d6. And this should be fine. This should be, for example, this position where the white king's covering up the f3 and the e and the h3 squares. Sorry, the king's covering these key squares now. It should be fine. There's no major tactic for black on the king's side. This position, it seems white should be fine. Yeah, there's no major issue there. It should be even. Okay, but in the game we have c6, so a further commitment of this pawn, literally, but it represents an active operation, and the white king is still sitting in the center, and also there's these light squares which seem vulnerable in the absence of the light square bishop, more vulnerable than usual. So b takes, d takes, and black looks to be playing now. It looks useful to hit that pawn, whilst these rooks are also disconnected here. Hello, or not. So rook fc8, and this is where the active operations, they spread like wildfire now into a further commitment. This is all with the king in the center and all with the light squares. So those two aspects are still present, potentially losing backfire aspects in theory. So queen c4. So really, white is kind of fundamentally violating what a lot of coaches would preach against. Try and the top priority of the opening in chess is basically to put the king into safety and develop pieces before indulging in active operations. But here, this is a further commitment. But does it actually backfire? If white wants to sack a pawn as a practical decision, is it absolutely losing in the context of a rapid game just to sack the pawn here? Not necessarily. White has that b5 square, but black is going to be technically better with a small edge there. Black can improve here actually with this. For example, no, this would be even as well. Pardon me. If we look, so yeah, maybe the pawn sack should be considered. Just giving up the pawn just to castle. Here, so knight d5. C8. And here, yeah, this, yeah, but it's not very pleasant to end up with a pawn down for not much compensation. However, this is starting to get really dodgy now. Bishop d8 is played to stop c7. On king h7, it does appear c7 is very nice. For example, here knight d5, white's got a big edge emerging with things like knight b6. So bishop d8 to stop the pawn, knight d5, and now e4 is played. C7 now, instead of castling, so pursuing relentlessly things with c7. Now, maybe the expectation was to play something like, if black plays bishop f6, then white has a very interesting position and kind of sometimes justifies the king not castling. For example, knight b6, knight e5, queen d5, rook a7, and there's actually knight takes c8 here, believe it or not. Because this pawn, this is actually very, very strong, even though there's tactics which seem to backfire on white. It's white that has the last laugh here with the pawn queening. So maybe Fabiano was dreaming of this sort of thing. Who knows? But yeah, let's look at this again with knight b6. There's also, for example, rook a6. This is quite entertaining. Knight takes c8. Black wins the queen, but loses the game after knight e7 check, c8 queening, and then taking the rook, which also coincidentally holds against queen d3. Yeah, there's some fascinating variations, but it's playing with fire. It's dancing on ice. Use whatever metaphors are appropriate. Yeah, it's a risky stuff. And actually, in the game, bang, bishop takes c7 is played instead, and these two major aspects of the position, the king in the centre and the light squares, are fully exploited, as well as a third tactical one to gain important forcing moves to exploit all of this, is the queen is actually a potential target here as well. So there's a number of factors coming in to the equation here, which makes this piece sack lead to a forcing move disaster, basically. So this knight is guarding e7, there's no check. So bishop takes c7, the absolutely strongest, most vicious move in the position, really actually punishing white for all of the active operations. So this is taken. Yes, it doesn't seem pleasant not to take it. So knight takes c7. Now there's the very powerful knight e5. And white is just totally busted here. White tries knight d5 with the idea of forking with knight e7 check. Now, what else? If queen e2, then knight d3 check. We're in the realms of very strong forcing moves on king d2 to kind of try and protect the rook. Unfortunately, there's queen a5 check. This position is just nasty. Black's not only getting the piece back, but the king here, this is just big trouble. Huge trouble with the king there, and the knight is like an octopus knight. c3 is being undermined. This is just gigantic, this position. For example, this is absolutely murderous. Black's going to be crashing through on the first rank with that huge knight. So queen e2 is just a total disaster. Queen d5, it's all backfiring. This is literally like art of war, the backfiring. Not if you don't put yourself beyond defeat before going on the attack, as they say in the art of war. This is what happens in chess terms. Rook takes c7, knocking out the defense of the d5 quick. The queen's just hanging now after check, and then queen takes d5. So if we look at this again, rook a b8. If rook c3 here, again rook takes c7, and then knight f3 check. So there's mechanisms here. It's just a horrible position. Everything really has backfired here in this position after knight e5. Okay, there are some that say, well, this is why World Championships shouldn't be decided on rapid or blitz. It's unfair, but that's the tie-break system at the moment. We used to have a time, for example, Karpov-Kasparov, for this endless match to try and get a certain number of wins. And if you remember, that was famously abandoned by FIDE as a huge controversy around that. And everyone was bored and tired and frustrated with all the endless draws. So we've got to have some sort of tie-break system. I believe it's a good idea to have some sort of tie-break system. And Magnus just happens to be brilliant at tie-breaks, basically. So knight d5, there's actually two moves here that are winning totally. If this is white's final trick, it's not that great. The two moves, well, Magnus played one of them, king h7, and white resigned. If knight takes c4, just to see the trick, knight e7 check, the counter trick, knight takes f5 leaves white a piece up, because actually here after check there's knight d1, don't have to lose the rook on h1. So, but yes, with king h7, just getting out of that trick. And even with white to move now, sorry, after knight d5, king h7, with white to move, it's busted. Because now, knight e7 doesn't work. There's actually queen f3, leaving the queen hit and the rook hit. For example, here, just take the queen and then take this rook. Huge advantage for black. On queen e2, knight d3 check, and then knight takes c1. King e2, just queen f3 check, and then knight takes c4 check. Yeah, it's a total disaster. So white has to kind of resign here. There's no doubt. It seems white has to resign here. Just for the record, though, king f8 was also possible, just to stop the counter trick. And yeah, it's just totally backfired. And that's the brutality of chess. I think one has to respect the higher level concepts of the art of war. They do come down concretely in chess terms, about backfiring, as far as I can see. So, yeah. And Magnus has chosen the battleground very carefully of the rapids. He was very confident with the draw offer, which he got some criticism for in game 12, but he said he does his own thing. He likes doing his own thing. He doesn't listen to us. He has belief in his own things. And in a way, that's often a good thing, because only you know what you're capable of, your strengths and weaknesses, and you're the one having to follow up on your decisions. So sometimes it's bad to take advice. Maybe sometimes Magnus is right that he knows himself more than anyone else. So he knows the follow-up. He knows what would happen, that he'd have the edge in the rapid. And now he's 2-0 up in the rapid. So that's also a great belief in himself, and that he can follow up on the decisions, which might seem a bit strange, but he knows the follow-up. He knows he's stronger at rapid, and he's proved it here. But also, to be fair, it seems Fabiano didn't have an ideal sleep the night before, so he wasn't in great shape on the day. So now he finds himself 2 games down, and so Magnus just needs to draw one of the 2 games to secure world championship, to become world champion again, to be world champion again. So, yeah. It's all round very good, I think, higher level strategy, I believe, from Magnus to get into this rapid, to steer for this rapid. Okay, I mean, maybe against a different opponent who's much better at rapid and blitz, he would change his strategy and try and win in the classical with more keenness. But yeah, this is absolutely a devastating final position of this game 2. Bit of shocking. Dramatic game 2, but yeah, a great lesson for people that are sort of getting into chess, to make sure the fundamentals of chess, that in the opening stage, to try and secure your king, to get the pieces developed before indulging at active operations. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this analysis. If you enjoyed it, then please click on the top left box, which should appear shortly, to become a member at chessworld.net, play against other YouTubers. You can also check the analysis of other games from the Master Collection menu, so the improved menu, learn from the masters, YouTube order. Okay, comments, questions, donations, see the description. Like, share, subscribe, but hit that notification bell. All really appreciated. And let's look now soon at game 3. Thanks very much.